call upon the spirit of the owl, messenger of wisdom. Welcome to the Temple of the Owl. Merry meet, seekers of knowledge, for I am Matzal, your host. I want to give you guys send some positivity your way, for those that need it. Hope you guys are having a great day. This is the Temple of the Owl in the forests of Northern California, and today we're talking about a man, a myth, a legend, Rasputin. And I just want to thank you guys for listening on KUAP Digital Broadcasting. It's the Troubled Minds Radio Network. Special shout out to all my Troubled Minds family and friends. I hope you guys are doing well. And thank you guys for listening. Today we're talking about Rasputin. And I thought it was a really cool, kind of a cool idea. Talk about this guy. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on here. And just want to talk about him and think about it in different ways. And I like to start the show with what I call the MOD, or the message of the day. And today's quote is, tonight we're stepping into the candlelit corners of history, into whispers of prayer, scandal, prophecy, and power. We're talking about a man wrapped in myth and shadow. A man named Grigori Rasputin. And that's from me. But he was a holy healer. Was he a dark sorcerer, a manipulator, or a mystic who simply understood forces that others feared? Let's pull back the veil. Who was Rasputin? Rasputin was born in 1869 in a small Siberian village. Cold, remote, and steeped in folk magic, superstition, and religious mysticism. He wasn't educated. He wasn't polished. He wasn't refined. But he had something far more powerful. He had a presence of charisma. He had hypnotic eyes and an uncanny ability to influence people. From a young age, people claimed Rasputin could see things, sense things, heal things. He wandered as a stonic, that's a holy pilgrim, traveling from monastery to monastery, learning prayers, chants, fasting rituals, and trance states. This was not polished church mysticism. This was raw, folk magic spirituality. Siberia is steeped in folk Christianity, shamanic remnants, superstition, and survival spirituality. Rasputin grew up poor, illiterate for much of his early life. He was wild, by most accounts. Stories describe his youth, as restless, prone to visions, emotionally intense, and drawn to extremes. That's what led him to fasting and prayer. Now, these are rumors. There was rumors of theft and trouble in his early years, but records are thin. What is clear is that Rasputin never fit into normal village life. Something pulled him outward. In his late teens or early 20s, Rasputin experienced a religious awakening. Some accounts say that he had a vision of the Virgin Mary. Others say it was guilt, illness, or spiritual oppression. Whether the trigger, he left home and became the stonic, a wandering holy pilgrim. For years he traveled, visiting the monasteries and learning the prayer and chants, practicing fasting and vigil, entering trance-like devotional states. This wasn't academic theory or theology. It was body-based mysticism, repetition, exhaustion, surrender, and ecstasy. Rasputin was never an ordained monk. He lived outside of the church's authority, and that's what made him suspicious and powerful. Was he a healer or a heretic? Rasputin believed suffering brought you closer to God. He believed sin and redemption were intertwined. This made him dangerous to the church and fascinating to those drawn to spiritual extremes. Rasputin believed something radical. You cannot be redeemed unless you have fully known sin. This belief echoes in certain heretical Christian mystic sects, where suffering and excess were seen as paths to divine understanding. To Rasputin, pain brought closeness to God, and desire was a doorway. Prayer and indulgence existed side by side. This worldview later fueled accusations of sexual misconduct, but it also explains why people found him magnetically compelling. He embodied contradiction. By the early 1900s, Rasputin arrived in St. Petersburg, at the heart of Russian power. He was dirty, unpolished, charismatic, but the aristocrats were fascinated by him. The clergy were alarmed. The women in society sought his blessings. And then fate intervened, a moment that changed everything, when he was introduced to the Russian royal family. The heir of the Russian throne, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia. It's a condition that caused uncontrollable bleeding. Doctors were helpless. Rasputin prayed. He spoke softly. He calmed the child. And somehow, inexplicably, the bleeding stopped. Again and again and again. Some say it was hypnosis. Some say it was coincidence. And some say it was divine intervention. But the royal family believed that Rasputin saved their son. And from that moment on, he became untouchable. Rasputin was seen as the protector of the throne. His influence grew. So did the rumors. He drank. He indulged. He took many lovers. People accused him of using sexual energy as magic for draining people's power, manipulating minds, and bending wills. To his enemies, he was a demon, but to his followers, he was holy. To history, he became something far more complicated. This is where Rasputin begins to resemble the witch archetype: feared, desired, powerful, and uncontrollable. A man who refused to fit neatly into saint or monster. Rasputin believed deeply in prophecy. He warned the royal family, "If I am killed by nobles, the throne will fall." He predicted war, chaos, the collapse. And shortly after his death, the Russian monarchy fell, and a revolution began. The world changed. Was it coincidence or a curse? Now, Rasputin's death reads like a ritual legend. He was poisoned, shot, beaten, and drowned. Each time they thought he was dead, he rose again. It took multiple attempts to finally silence him, and even then, stories say his body fought death until the very end. This is the kind of death that witches recognize, the mystic death. It's the kind that turns a man into a symbol. As a witch archetype, Rasputin represents the dangerous folk mystic healer outside the system of spiritual outcast, the one who walks between holiness and the taboo that reminds us that power doesn't come from respectability. It comes from understanding energy, the belief, and human psychology. History often calls people like Rasputin mad or evil because it doesn't know what to do with those who don't obey the rules. When we talk about Rasputin, it's easy to treat him like an anomaly, like a one-off monster, a strange footnote in history. But when you zoom out and you look across cultures, across centuries, you realize something unsettling. And Rasputin wasn't unique. He was familiar, because every culture has someone like him, a figure that walks between the worlds, a healer that doesn't belong to the system, someone both feared and desperately sought out. In the Siberian and Central Asian traditions, shamans enter trance through exhaustion, fasting, chanting, and repetition. They heal without presence, with voice, with gaze. That was what Rasputin did. He didn't need any tools. He didn't need education. He just needed belief and the body. And the shamans everywhere were accused of the same things that Rasputin was accused of. Too much power, too much sexuality, too much influence. They're never polite. They're never comfortable. They're dangerous because they work outside of permission. And if you look at the European witches, especially during the medieval and early modern periods, the parallels are impossible to ignore. Witches are folk healers, midwives, herbalists, people with knowledge the church didn't control. They were blamed for disease, for unrest, for moral decay. Rasputin was blamed for the collapse of an entire empire. It's the same fear, different century. Across Africa and the Caribbean, spirit workers enter ecstatic states, loud, embodied, overwhelming. Their magic isn't quiet. It isn't sanitized. It moves through the body. And Rasputin terrified the elites because his spirituality wasn't refined. It was physical, it was emotional, and it was messy. It was the kind of magic that always scares those in power. Look at indigenous healers and the Americans. They often experience a calling through an illness or a psychological breakdown, a shattering that becomes an initiation, like a dark night of the soul. Rasputin had that too. He had instability. He had visions. In the sense that he was never really fully here. Now, shamans live on the edge of society, and so did he. If you look at tantric mystics, left-hand path practitioners, you see the same pattern again and again. Sacred transgression, sex, and the spirit intertwined, breaking taboos to each transformation. Rasputin believed you could not be redeemed without first knowing sin. That belief alone made him heretical, but it also made him powerful. Across cultures, these figures share the same fate. They rise during times of collapse. They reflect what society doesn't want to see. And they become symbols instead of people. And eventually, they are destroyed. Not because they're evil, but because they remind the world that power doesn't come from crowns or churches or titles. It comes from understanding the belief. The lesson we take away from Rasputin is that he was not clean magic. He was not safe magic. He was wild magic. And that is why his story still haunts us. Because deep down we know the world has always feared those who heal without permission, those who speak prophecy without crowns, and those who touch the unseen and refuse to apologize for it. So, question the stories you're told, and always remember that power is never comfortable, but it's always revealing. Rasputin was not a saint. He was not a demon. He was a liminal figure, a folk healer, a trance mystic, an outsider shadow priest, a man who understood belief as power. History punishes people like him because they heal without credentials, and they influence without titles. They channel power without permission. Rasputin reminds us that spiritual power attracts projection. Charisma can be used as a weapon, and that mysticism without grounding can destroy both the mystic and the world around them. He wasn't magic itself. He was a mirror for a dying empire. And like all mirrors, people hated what they saw. Before we close tonight, I want to use a grounding story that we can carry with us. Rasputin teaches us that power without permission will always be feared. He didn't fit inside institutions. He didn't follow the rules of polite spirituality. He practiced healing, trance, and influence in ways that made people uncomfortable, and history punishes those kinds of practitioners. So here's the witchy lesson. Not all magic is clean. All healers are not gentle, and not all spiritual paths are respectable. But power demands responsibility. Rasputin reminds us that unchecked energy can consume the wielder just as easily as it transforms the world around them. As witches, mystics, and seekers, our work is not just to gather our power, but to know when to use it, and know when to restrain it, and know when to step away. So ask yourself these questions. Where am I holding influence? Where am I being tempted by ego? And where does my magic need grounding? Because the most dangerous magic isn't darkness. It's power without wisdom. So sit with that, you guys. And just want to do that show, talk about Rasputin. Until next time, keep your magic rooted, your spirit protected, and your power balanced. This is Matt's Owl signing off for Temple of the Owl. Thank you guys for listening. KUAP, Digital Broadcasting, Troubled Minds Radio Network. Thank you guys.